Hello and welcome to another episode of Live with Littledata. I'm joined here by Wiehan today from Magnet Monster. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be a great chat.
So Wiehan, tell us a little bit more about Magnet Monster for those that don't know.
Absolutely. Okay, so Magnet Monster is a little agency that basically services e-commerce brands, D2C brands, with email and SMS marketing strategies. So those are the two channels that we essentially, manage for our D2C brands. And then of course that basically seeps into retention marketing, direct mail, push notifications, and so forth. So that's kind of what we do, our bread and butter, and we just love it.
And you're the new CEO, so not new to email marketing, but new to running the show.
That is correct. Look, I mean, massive shoes to fill, but such a pleasure. It helps us to be at the forefront of everything that we love. So a big shift in the business, and I'm here for it.
Awesome. So let's start off talking a bit more generally about the title of the show is how to scale email SMS marketing, but just more broadly, I guess the challenge is actually, if you as a data-driven brand, is getting accurate data so that you can actually first of all understand what's happening across your channels and maybe compare across channels, but also being able to actually target marketing and serve smart ads to the right users. So how do you see that sort of broad problem for the brands you work with?
It's a very good topic to discuss. We see it vary across the different sizes of a business that enters our space. Of course, on the smaller end of the scale, the smaller D2C brands, they don't care too much about clean data, consolidating all their data sets, and so forth. But when you start to deal with much more complicated brands that deal with different channels, from paid to influencer marketing to SMS and email, these problems and challenges becomes a lot more prominent. We recently partnered with a huge footwear brand, and they brought a lot of these challenges to the table. So the very first challenge that they brought to the table is exactly that, performance measurement, their data. They don't trust Klaviyo attribution. They don't trust attentive attribution. They feel like it's, of course, over attributing. You then push your data into Northbeam, and then we don't trust Northbeam because Northbeam is underreporting. Brilliant tool, brilliant. I mean, there's many reasons why people use it.
Yeah.
But now people don't trust, each other's, data sources and source of truth. And then how do you connect the dots, when you have these problems within the business? So that's the very first challenge that we do face, is no one is trusting, the data. GA4 is just sometimes empty and broken and completely useless. The other one is, of course, away from the data side of things, is how can we squeeze more out of our Klaviyo flows and our Klaviyo efforts. We know the abandonment flows, cart abandonment, added to cart, browse abandonment. That's a massive focus for D2C brands and businesses similar to ours. And people always want to know, how can I squeeze more dollars out of these flows? How can I learn more about the people entering these different flows and different stages? Then you've got your iOS privacy, Facebook privacy, ad blockers. It's a very, very intense area to be within, because these challenges are quite prominent. And we see
quick about kind of return on investment with Klaviyo, because obviously no one ever complains about Klaviyo's features and UI. It's great, but obviously they do complain about it's an expensive tool, and if they're going to use it, they want to kind of get the most out of it. And I think that's part of our mantra, and we'll come on a bit more about the card abandonment campaigns. But obviously there are certain kinds of tactics using Klaviyo which are always going to be incredibly highly performing. So the people who are not getting value are kind of the ones doing what I would call kind of mass, kind of dumb big lists, where obviously it's expensive because you're sending loads of emails, you're not actually getting much revenue per recipient.
Yeah, that's correct. And of course, it has a ripple effect into your email deliverability, your inbox placement rates, and many other things in the business. So you're right, the ripple effect is quite massive if it's not done sufficiently.
but let's just go back to the we go on to that. Let's go talk about the attribution problem. So I think yeah, you're right. We hear that all the time. So the two things, obviously, Klaviyo's own attributed value is it's greedy, right? And it's actually not it's not that Klaviyo trying to make it up. It's just that email marketing by definition tends to be bottom of the funnel, and so it's always going to steal. If you look at last click attribution from stuff that's further up the funnel or earlier in the buying process, and then I guess Littledata's, you're right, people use North Beam or Triple Whale, but that creates then another sort of source of, a whole nother thing you got to trust. And it's some interesting podcasts I listened to last year talking about how, okay, it's great, but actually then you've just got another thing to reconcile. So I guess Littledata's approach is a bit different, which is to basically say, look, the source of truth you really trust is Shopify. Like, that that's the actual dollars that hit your bank account. So let's kind of start from there and try and make sure through server-side tracking we can actually reconcile all of the orders through into Google Analytics. And then, I'm a booster for Google Analytics. I believe if it's set up correctly, it's a perfectly good way to do cross-channel attribution. But you need to first of all start with making it match Shopify so that you can kind of see the revenues actually tracking correctly.
That's correct. The other thing that people also don't consider is, look, I'm a massive fan of Looker Studio for reporting.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, hey, it's free and the capabilities is massive.
Flexible.
Problem is, again, you can plug GA4 into it, great. But now you sit with Attentive, you sit with Loop subscriptions, you sit with Yotpo and all these different platforms, Recharge. They've got phenomenal analytics built into their platforms.
Yeah.
How do you then now bring that into the mix so you have everything housed in one area?
Yeah.
I've seen all shapes and forms of BI dashboards. Gosh, all over the show. People piping supermetrics data into Google Sheets. The Google Sheets breaks because it cannot handle big data.
Yeah.
Mess. If you can pipe it back into GA4 correctly, and then GA4 connected to, let's say, like a funnel tool or data warehouse piping tool, ETL, and then you plug it into your BI dashboard. So that is the one. If you can solve that, doesn't matter if you email an email channel or PPC channel. That's the gold. That's the gold. And Littledata allowing that is money in the bank. It's money in the bank.
So you're right. I mean, getting the data right in Google Analytics is the first step, and then I guess for bigger brands are scaling and maybe having trouble with sampling issues and that kind of thing, then or data latency, then the obvious thing is you add BigQuery in the middle. So you do Google Analytics to BigQuery to Looker Studio, and you're paying a bit for Looker Studio for BigQuery, a little bit, like tens of dollars a month. But you're getting Google Analytics and Looker Studio, two great tools, leveraging all that free value. So that's sort of the way I think about it is can you make the most of the free bits of Google Stack by just paying for some of the upgrade bits?
That's on the money. The other challenge that we also find with this is so of course our target audience is either D2C founders, so we speak directly to the person putting the strings on the budget, but then we also have the CMOs or the retention marketing specialists, and they need to, of course, answer to the big bosses, the C-suite or the investors. Now, I worked at a company a few years ago where, so of course, me as a marketer, I'm not always privy to the CRM, that data. So I was reliant on Google Analytics back then, not GA4. And then I would report on a monthly basis and like, hey guys, I mean, like 2,500 free trial signups this month, and they would go, no, we're actually sitting at 4,500. So it was completely underreported. Who looks like the idiot? Yeah, of course, me. And you don't build the trust. So and we as a marketer, if you lose that trust, you're kind of screwed in so many ways.
Yeah, 100%. And I sort of that's why a lot of our messaging is about kind of trust your data again, because as you say, as a marketing leader, as CMO, whatever, as soon as you're reporting numbers which don't reconcile with the kind of the numbers that the big boss knows are true or the investors know are true, then immediately you're shot, right? No one's going to believe the breakdown. Yeah, just a quick message to if you have any questions for either of us, please ping them in the chat. We'll get relayed them. Thank you. Okay, cool. So let's talk a bit more about Klaviyo and the challenge of kind of improving performance there. Yeah, so I guess you obviously brands come to you. Maybe they've used an agency before. Maybe they've just done in house. What do you see? And I know you do a kind of thorough audit as part of the first step. What do you see as some of the most common challenges or areas for improvement?
Good question. So a couple of things. I mean, if I had to talk about or talk around flow performance, emails going out, the big one that I constantly see is, of course, people want to constantly squeeze as much revenue out of their abandonment flows, cart abandonment, added to cart, browse abandonment. The problem with that is that the emails within just the nature of an abandonment flow email, how it functions is you don't want to over engineer it. Okay. It's a little nudge reminder. You forgot something in your cart, maybe add some trust signals. Great. The problem is like people are constantly trying to over engineer, these flows, because how do you squeeze more value out of it? How many, where can you get the dollars from? So that's the very first thing that we see is people are constantly over engineering these flows. Really, there's other ways to do it, and we'll cover the ways in which you can do it.
And over engineering in terms of like too much sort of logic complexity of spreading the flows.
Correct. They're trying to build out all these different permutations. If this condition gets matched, then send this off. And we do, we send one every single 24 hours after one another, just because they feel like that is probably going to ramp up the attributed dollars coming from that. There's better ways to do it, and we'll discuss it. That's the first one, of course. The other one is, of course, iOS, the privacy, movement is a huge problem for us as marketers, just because you can't track people. I mean, anonymous, visitors. It's so bad for even an SMS channel, just because it is a personal channel. You want to be able to identify someone, identify their patterns, behaviors, so you can adjust your emails and content and your targeting and so forth, to kind of speak to this person, right? I mean, if I can see their browsing patterns and their preferences, I become a stronger email marketer. Hence why people kind of over rely on zero-party data to try and feed that back into the system, because how the hell do you learn more about these people if they're anonymous, visitors? And then, of course, other things like ad blockers, blocking the Klaviyo tracking scripts from firing on the client side, the browser. Huge problems for us, because, I mean, the amount of event firing that we lose between Shopify and Klaviyo is big. I think those are the big challenges and issues we see with how can we squeeze more dollars out of our flows, and what is kind of hindering that ability.
Awesome. Well, as you well know, Littledat's in business to try and solve certainly part of that problem. I thought I might just actually we've done a new graphic for this week with our designer, and going to try and illustrate what we're doing at a high level. So, as you said, the problem is you've got for someone to kind of target someone, an abandoned cart audience, they need to be in this sort of interlapping segment. They need to be on your email subscriber list, and they also need to qualify for that triggered email flow. And the problem is that they, as you say, what's going down through an erosion of tracking on the storefront is the number of people who are on your email list who you can actually target. So that means however clever your flow is, however clever your messaging is, or your dynamic email template or whatever, it's still a small audience receiving the emails, and so therefore small audience, small revenue opportunity. What Littledata is doing is effectively increasing the size of that overlap. We're not adding anyone to your email list, the same number of subscribers on the list. What we're doing is just making sure that more of those email subscribers can qualify for the triggered flows, and that means a 3 times boost in audience size, and that means you get more dollars, because the emails themselves are highly, well, as you say, by the time you've done some of the other optimizations, they should be highly performing. That these people have intention to buy. They're on your site. They obviously were interested in the product. The key thing is you've got to be able to just target a bigger number of them. So I guess what do you see as, so going a bit deeper on that one? What are the challenges for because you say there were a number of reasons why this has become harder, why it's bases fewer people who those are triggering for. You mentioned a bit about kind of, I mean, obviously there's sort of, as you say, iOS. I mean, people generally think about it as iOS restrictions. I mean, it's actually sort of basically Safari and WebKit browsers, but same difference. That Apple's trying to crack down on. Well, I guess they're trying to crack down on basic users being tracked when they didn't think they were being tracked, which is in some ways fair enough. But obviously, brands get caught in the crossfire because in some cases they are, I mean, if a user's opted into the email list and they've said they're happy to, they've accepted cookies, they don't mind being tracked, right? This is sort of like Apple's sort of nanny state where it says even if you said yes, we think you might have meant no.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, that's a conversation that we can have, for the next,
Yeah.
70 hours if we have that. I'm of that mindset that I don't think people mind being tracked,
No.
as long as it doesn't become like creepy and invading. And I think the one thing that people that annoys them is interfering their, buying journey.
100%, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you then gonna interfere, then it becomes a little bit weird. Or we know the big movement around, or the big debate around, Google Home or whatever these, all these platforms are listening in.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about, I mean, my wife, we always talk about this in the shops. We talk about, let's say, baby clothing. Okay, not baby
Yeah.
clothing. No more kids for me, please. Not baby clothing. We
Yeah.
talk about surfing, and then
Yeah.
of course, the ads after that will be surfing. Then that
Yes.
becomes a little bit problematic. But I think if people show some intention, some buying
Yeah.
intention, I don't mind being tracked. I mean, because sometimes tracking me becomes much better because the ads I'm getting,
Yeah.
the messaging I'm getting is a lot more geared towards what I'm actually interested in, rather
Yeah.
than you sending me stuff around like granny hats that I need to wear.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need to wear granny
Well,
hats.
I think there's lots of surveys that show that consumers are actually happy with advertising where it is actually relevant to their needs. And I think the fine line, and just to be clear, Littledata's on the right side of the line, is between, where you actually opt into the email list and you're actually interested in hearing from this brand, and you're clearly on their store and you're interested in buying something. And then where it crosses the line to being creepy is where you never gave that brand their email, but suddenly you've got an email in your inbox from them. And this stuff is happening. There's some solutions to do that. They get away with it in the US because there's very limited sort of consumer protection laws there, or people take a lax view of kind of email marketing permission. But I think that it sure hits your spam rates because there's a certain number of consumers like, well, no, hang on, I didn't. I know I visited. They might remember they visited the brand storefront, but they're like, but only to check something out. I never gave you permission to market to me. And so I think that's the key thing: is has the consumer actually said, "Yeah, I'm happy to, I want to get messaging from you," and actually more than I want to get relevant messaging from you, or have they just said, "No, I'm okay, thanks."
And that's the key difference here is Littledata doesn't interfere with email opt-in regulations. Okay. If
Yeah,
someone stipulates that I don't want to receive marketing emails from you, in
yeah,
Klaviyo, of course, we respect that.
right,
We
yeah,
don't send them spammy emails because it's bad for the brand as well.
yeah,
So there's definitely, like you say, there is that layer of, okay, now you're interfering with the privacy of it.
yeah,
But if you find the right balance between Littledata or Littledata, Klaviyo, Yotpo, whatever platform you use,
yeah,
and you respect their opt-in, status, then there's no issue with it. In
correct.
fact, it's quite bad if you don't have it set up. Then that's quite bad as a
Yeah,
brand.
and there are those solutions. I mean, I call them out, sort of retention.com and Wonderkind, that do use what I call non-opted-in lists. They add people to your email list who had not consented yet. Obviously, they can opt out, but that's slightly different. The problem, and then people have tolerated that, even though it's a little bit grey. I think what's changing though is two things. The first is a growing awareness of the actual regulatory risk in Europe, that actually if you are trading in Europe, even if it's a small part of your business, just 10% of your business, you can be fined based off your global revenue if you breach those regulations. So if you do 100 million globally and you're only a million in the UK, you can still get a €3 million fine, and that would be pretty bad. But I think the third thing is this whole change about the way, which I'm sure you know more about than me, but the way that spam complaints are now being kind of automatically syncing deliverability, and a tiny volume of spam complaints can actually ruin your inbox placement. And I'm just not sure brands can take the risk for those. Yeah, as I said, there's a minority of consumers who'll kind of notice that stuff, but some people will. Some people will notice that, no, I didn't give you my email, and no, it's not okay that I've got an email from you.
Exactly. Very fine line, but you are correct. You do want to take notice of the negative impact that could happen if you make silly decisions in your tech stack.
Yeah. So we talked about, maybe that's a good segue into sort of deliverability more generally. I mean, obviously this has been, I'm sure, a big theme for your business the last year. What are some of the recommendations? You said obviously that's critical, inbox placement. Like how do you help improve that for a brand? What are the key ways am I doing?
I mean, look, there's definitely a couple of configuration things that you need to take into account, and it can go into a very tech talk if we go into that space. The very first thing that you want to take notice of is your sending domain configuration. Are you sending through a dedicated sending domain? If you're still sending through like a Klaviyo shared domain, you're not going to get penalized. It's still fine, but the problem is that you're using shared IP pools and you can't control and
Klaviyo has quite a big banner now at the top. So if you do it, because we have that for our test account, they basically, it doesn't go away.
Exactly, they do. And so configuration is a big one. DKIM, SPF, all those protocol setups. I've recently, I saw a LinkedIn post of a very, very smart email deliverability guy in the space, where he reported like phishing, an attack on a sending domain, one of his clients, and they've sent like, I don't know, it was like 50K, spammy emails to people. Now, of course, it lands in the spam. If Google catches it, it lands in the spam folder, but people can still report you. So that's the very first thing to get right is your technical setup. And then of course we look at other things like your performance metrics, unsubscribe rates, bounce rates, marked email as spam rates. And then the third leg is of course your sending reputation. So tools like Google Postmaster tools, where you can monitor that over time. And then the fourth one is looking at like blacklisting. Have you been blacklisted somewhere? We've had a European brand. They were blacklisted on one of their big. It wasn't a massive, ISP. It wasn't huge, but it was probably about 5% of the recipients were, and they were all going to spam. Probably not 99% of it, just because there was a blacklist that they had to lift from that.
That's a 5% overall hit on deliverability, which is quite big. Yeah,
1,000%. So yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one.
And what can I guess, as you say though, the reason they've got on the list is because of spam complaints. So what can brands do about either the email? Is it about changing the email frequency or kind of subject lines and stuff that helps lessen the likelihood people complain? Or not?
It's a tricky one because everybody wants that black and white clear answer to, okay, what should I do? How much of what, when, how? Recently I had a conversation with a brand, big D2C brand. Is the cadence the problem? Is the targeting, the segmentation the problem? Like, what is it? Very hard to say. I think it's a case of, I wouldn't say people need to make massive shifts in how they handle their marketing stuff. If you see certain signals in the data that indicates that, okay, somewhere something is wrong. So at a high level, so of course the beauty about Klaviyo stats, I know of course there's better platforms out there if you want to find deliverability stats, but is you obviously go high level, then you see, okay, right, damn, I'm seeing 3.5% unsubscribe rate last week. And then you can go straight to the actual source of that. Was it a particular campaign where it occurred, or is it a particular flow, email in the flow?
Right.
Then you start now and unpack it to see, wow, okay, it looks like on email 7 of flow, this
Yeah.
a lot of spam or unsubscribes
Yeah.
is kind of happening in that. So that's kind of how you do it, and
Yeah.
then gauge from there. Otherwise, there's no people are looking for the black and white magic sword. There isn't.
No.
We see brands that sends probably an email or two a day. I mean, that's aggressive. That's 60 emails per month, and that's just campaigns. I'm not even talking about flows. And the unsubscribe rate is 0.2%.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's, it's, it's a,
But yeah, it's interesting that the I guess the point, and actually maybe that's part of the reason people like Klaviyo, is that say it does a really good sort of drill down analytics, so you can really just kind of like drill into a particular day and then particular flows, and that's useful.
exactly.
Cool. So yeah, maybe just to finish off, just maybe going back to the topic of kind of identity resolution and kind of what Littledata can do for brands. I mean, I think you showed me earlier you have quite an interesting little calculator you built of just showing kind of if you could boost the targeting, what that would mean. We can share it here. Yeah, perhaps just you might have to zoom in a little bit, but to talk us through a little roughly what you're thinking is here.
Okay, so essentially the concept around, if you haven't caught it already, around Littledata and what they're trying to achieve here is they're trying to allow you as a brand to reach a bigger audience with your flows. Okay, because if more people see your emails, the higher the chance of them converting. So with this calculator that we have, or the sheet, we essentially forecast different scenarios. So on this particular one here, again, these are mere numbers here. So you enter in your monthly, order count from Shopify. It could even be sorry, not from Shopify, from your flows, your abandonment flows, and so on. You then basically set a percentage increase in those emails being sent out to people. So this particular one, I've set it to 40%. Of course, you can set it to 10, 20, 30. We've seen with tools like Littledata, we've seen cases where it's a lot more than 40% of emails getting sent. But 40%, we keep it conservative, Exactly. You then also set a conversion rate change. So what conversion rate change do you kind of expect from more emails being delivered to people? Of course, sometimes, mostly, the more people receive your emails, the lower your conversion rate kind of gets, because you're now sending to a bigger audience. So we keep it conservative here, 0.6 delta. If you mark it at 1, there's not going to be, you're basically saying that there's not going to be a change in conversion, which is a lie, because sometimes it goes higher. Okay, sometimes it goes higher, better.
We have seen a couple of brands who've gone better, but yeah, okay, be conservative. Yep.
Be conservative. I mean, we've had cases where we implement the software and the conversion rate goes up.
Yeah.
Because you're now hitting, you're sending more emails to the high intent buyers. So this is very conservative. What it then does is it basically then calculates your legacy flow. So prior to Littledata, and then the after uplift. So you can see here, again, not to go into too many specifics here, you can look at the amount of emails that get sent by, like, your abandoned cart, flow.
Yeah.
A lot more emails will get sent out when people hit that flow or that condition. A lot more additional orders will be placed. If your AOV is like $34, your conversion rate, you're looking at like a 13K. Again, this is a forecast. You're looking at an additional 13K in revenue just coming from that flow alone on a monthly basis. Very, very conservative forecast, but I would take 13K just coming from one flow.
And as you say, you've done a little ROI calculation on the right. Because,
exactly. And the same thing happens on browser abandonment, okay? Because Littledata kind of, equips both to perform higher and better. Your browser abandonment, your added to cart, your checkout. So you do the same calculation pretty much there. And then you can see the total revenue added, again, very conservative for this brand, 16K. Okay.
Yeah.
If you pay about 2,200 USD a month for the subscription
Yeah.
service, you're looking at like a 7 times 700% uplift or ROI just from this exercise alone. And the beauty about this is that it takes you 10 minutes to implement Littledata.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't change any of your flow creatives because you just make a clone of it. So you don't spend money on any resources. And you just keep the subscription service running month over month. And this is kind of what you're looking at as an additional uplift every single month. I mean, that's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Absolutely. We had in our company, we had one of our sort of company values is steal with pride. When you see something good, so this sheet I'm going to steal with pride.
I also steal. Yep. We're still in a team format. So join the group.
Well, look, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been super interesting to hear a bit more about what you're doing and then more generally chatting about data. So I'm sure we will. Well, I think I'm going to come on do your live stream next week. So.
Absolutely. Yep. I'll host you next. And thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And thanks again once again for creating software that does allow us email and SMS marketers to have like cleaner, better data, and of course boost our flows with like 10 minutes of effort. So appreciate the brains behind these different software abilities.